one. All right, guys, welcome back to the other side of awakening. First off, I just appreciate all the positive feedback that we've gotten. And I say this, these episodes, I'll just say it briefly. This is not an anti-medicine podcast, and it's not designed that way. It's actually quite the opposite. This medicine has absolutely changed my life, which means it's changed my wife's life, my daughter's life, my son's life, my neighbors, my community. And for that, I'm eternally grateful. But also because of that, I have so much reverence for it, and appreciation and respect for it, that I think it's important that people go into these experiences knowing that all the probable or possible outcomes. And as facilitators, again, how do we minimize people having more of these like destabilizing or traumatic experiences? What are some of the things that we could implement or look out for that would prevent this? And I do think that some of these are just going to happen, but I think the objective, like everything, is minimize the amount of harm that we're doing in the space. So this is just to highlight that, bring some of these stories to people's attention, and us as a community just find a way to continue to improve and evolve and do better. That being said, I'm so grateful to have Paige with me. Paige has been nothing but a blessing, and I say that we actually have been talking for an hour. I'm sorry, Paige, prior to starting this, because I just respect her opinion and perspective so much. So I'm really excited for this conversation. Um, that being said, Paige, again, to be cognitive of your time, if you can just share a little bit about what led you to work with 5-MeO DMT or BUFO to begin with.
Yeah. So I would say around 22, I was 22 years old. I saw this podcast with Martin Ball and Leo Gura at the time talking about five. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. This God molecule and it you embody God and you become God. And I just was like, wow, this is interesting. Because also at the time I had been maybe on about year four of learning about basically a mystery school, an occult school about, this part called the subjective plane where all is one. And I'm like, I got to get to that point. I don't know how I can get there, but I would love to feel that because it just seems like it's love, it's bliss, it's oneness, it's totality. And so hearing that podcast, it sparked my interest. 2 years later come around and I'm into psilocybin and other entheogens at low dose, of course. And then there's this introduction for me to take a full release dose of five. And at that time in my life, I had already, there was a lot going on and I needed restructuring. I needed to feel joy again. I was dealing with depression and some other different things, trauma. And so I had the warm invite to do it, and it was the best experience of my life. Best experience.
So first time went well.
Yes.
What would when was the first time? I guess so. And again, I know the history here to some degree. So it was your second experience that went a little bit different than the first experience. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. So the first experience, I took the medicine. I didn't go deep enough. It was like I was
Mm,
right there. I couldn't go deep enough. And I was like, no, I'm going to come back tomorrow and do it again. So then when I came
okay.
back tomorrow and I did it, like, wow, this is incredible. It just felt like everything in life made sense. Even the things that didn't make sense and hardships and things like that, everything made sense. It was what they described it when you fully release, right? It was all of these wonderful feelings of bliss, love, joy, uh, just connection with the all, realizing that everything is perfect. It not to be explicit here, but orgasm times 1,000. It was perfect, right? Um, and so I took it. Yeah, I took maybe about 10 milligrams, want to say, and then the following year I did it again,
Same
and
group?
that no,
Okay.
different facilitator. Um, and then that was destabilizing for me.
Okay.
Mhm.
What were some of the differences, if any, between The first facilitator and the second facilitator? Were there any like obvious differences, or was it pretty much the same to you?
The there were not a lot of obvious differences, I would say. The setting was very comfortable, and I know that she gave me an image of something. And so that was interesting, but for the most part, there wasn't much of any differences. There was sacredness involved, but for the most part, both facilitators allowed me to go through my experience. There wasn't any interference. So
Beautiful.
there was, like I said, music and things of that nature, but there wasn't much of a difference. There was a comfortable setting in both.
Okay. How was the intake process with each of the experiences? Was it, again, we see all sorts. We see a very light intake process, sometimes just over the phone. Hey, are you taking any medications? Sometimes there's more in-depth intake process. What was the intake process for you, if you remember?
It was very like, hey, are you on any medications? Very brief. Not
Okay.
enough intake, but very brief. Just very brief.
It's interesting that you say not enough, because again, it's the beauty of these is we're able to kind of look back on those experiences, and I've shared to nausea probably to people my first experience that seemed amazing at the time, right? But I could look back now and be like, that probably wasn't ideal. This no intake process. They didn't even ask me if I was on any medications. And now us knowing better, we know that's not ideal. Um, yeah, so that's interesting. Um, so very similar kind of environment, minimum intake process. What do you think could have been better about the intake process? And do you think that could have prevented or minimized the negative experience?
Well, um, you know, I didn't fill out any forms for both of them. One. And so there wasn't much of any like I said, like detailed questions, me going into things that I need to work through, or what's happening here. There was none of that going on. It was just like, are you on any medications? Have you ever been hospitalized? Have you ever had a psychotic break or anything like that? What is your history with entheogens, and are you currently taking any or abusing any illicit drugs or whatever the case may be? It was pretty much that, but there was nothing else that was asked of me. Um, and so the other thing too is that you could do intakes, but are the facilitators actually reading them and taking them into account? So yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm in agreement with that, and I'm kind of an advocate now. It's like even the forms. Like I remember going to a friend's house, and he's like, "I'm going to put you through the same forms I put everybody through." I'm like, absolutely respect that. I'm ADHD. Like I'm like they're asking me for like these stories, and I'm like, I'm just kind of rushing through it, right? Like, because I don't feel great, or whatever it may be. I was just like getting short answers, and that hit me. I'm like, I can't be the only one feeling that. That's kind of rushing through these things. There's so much more information in actually having this conversation with people. The body language, the icon, like all of that, and so I think yes, having the physical forms is better than no forms. But really, like spending time with somebody, even like on a Zoom call like this, and just saying, "Hey, you'd kind of mentioned this. I'd love to hear more about that." You're going to learn so much more about the participant, and you're also going to create a connection with them, right? Which I think
Yes.
is important in that space. It's create some safety. So that's just a recommendation to anybody out there. If you're stepping in the space, filling out forms, there's nothing wrong with that. Ideally, though, I think there's a conversation. The facilitator's taking some time to get to know you and really get to know you more through that conversation than just some of the answers on the forms. Um, so on the next experience, let's talk about how that played out. I'm curious what the experience was like, and when was the first time that you noticed like something may be off here?
Yeah, I felt like it was like the slingshot effect of the first experience where I just went into non-duality. And this experience was quite a bit different. It was non-duality, but I was experiencing the opposite of what you would say would be bliss. It felt very dark, I would say. There was a lot of dark themes uh in terms of feeling, right? And in experience. It just felt like there were a lot of dark themes. And I came out of it so overwhelmed by the the grief or suffering or loss of some sort that it was destabilizing for me. And at the time I did not have as much support that I needed. Um, and about 2 months later was when I said, okay, I need to reach out to this Martin Ball guy. I'm gonna get his book. And so when I read his book, it was very helpful for me. And but I said I need to go a bit more deeper, and I need to book an integration session with him. And that session was very helpful because during those 2 months, I was slowly trying to put my life back together, but there was a lot of things I was trying to put back together that I just couldn't anymore. And that also was just very like, ugh, and because I'm from, an inner city, Chicago, and, my community is not as entheogenic friendly, nobody really understood exactly what I was going through. You know, other entheogens are one thing, but 5 is a whole nother ball game. And I did not have that uh, foundation set up when I came out of my journey, um, which now we are well informed of that you have to have that, at least have systems in place when you do something like that. So when I integrated with Martin, I was able to be like, okay, yes, all right, I can put together some things, the other things I let go of, and then I move on from there. And so that was very, very helpful, very helpful.
So when you first came out of the experience, right? So it's almost like you saw the flip side of the coin of the love and light, um,
Yes.
right? Which is interesting because again, I think and again, I'm still working through this. But kind of I see in the spiritual community and especially in this space, it's like unconditional love and God is everything, right? And I do believe that. I think everything is interconnected and God is everything. But that also means that God is the murderer and the rapist. Um, you know what I mean? And all these other things that we would not want to perceive as it. It's like so there is this dualistic aspect to God, right? And we could have a debate of like, oh, it's all good, fine. But in the matrix that we're in, or the reality we're in, we're going to perceive that as the dark side or the negative, and God is all of that. But we're not really having those
Mhm.
conversations. So for some folks that I see that have similar experiences, that throws them off because it goes contrary to how they want to perceive what God is. And if God is everything, it's everything, right? It can't be just the things that we choose. It is everything. And if that's God or consciousness trying to experience this reality through a multitude of experiences, it's all of those. And so I think, yeah, some folks will see the flip side of the coin and it's really, of course, it would make sense. It's destabilizing. It doesn't make sense. And it could bring some grief and heartache of like, oh, the world is kind of messed up sometimes. Um,
Mhm. Mhm.
so when you first came out of the experience, you're a little overwhelmed. What I'm just kind of curious, what was going through your mind? What are the facilitators doing? Like, what's the environment like? And yeah,
Well, when it happened, I was like, oh my God, like this is terrible, because there were even, I would say, towards the end of the ceremony, I was in just a, I was embodying the feeling and also just feeling like I was in this place of just a place that no soul should be, right? It was just the muck, I would say the absolute bottom, right? And that brought me a lot of again, that brought me a lot of, I would say, I want to say sickness, but it just kind of made me sick a little bit. And but it also brought me a lot of empathy and compassion because if a feeling or a place or some sort feels like that, and you know that you don't want no soul to be there, and there's an ability and a possibility that something could be there, then you would do all you can to be a better being,
Mm.
right? And so in those in the ugliness of that was where I was able to recover and realize that okay, these things exist for us to be better. Sometimes love and light is just not enough. And some of us may see some things that are just downright ugly. And so, but the integration piece was able to help me put that back together rather than focus on, oh my God, God was all these terrible things, right? And this is why integration is just so important when dealing with this medicine because it is another side to it that you see that you know there may not be as much support available. Like when I was doing this, this was 2020, about 5 years ago. So yeah.
And did the facilitators offer integration as kind of a follow-up, or did you reach out to them and just say, "Hey, look, I'm not doing really good with this experience. Can you help?" What was how did that all play out, if at all?
No integration, none. No. Um, I was pretty much on my own with that. And so that's why it took 2 months to find Martin.
Mm. So again, I think for people listening that are considering stepping into this space, and even facilitators, but if you're considering stepping into the space, that's one of the big questions, right? Do you offer integration? Do you offer support? And if the answer is no, I'm not saying don't sit with them, but then it's kind of on you to find a support system, right? Not just integration, because as Paige kind of articulated, this isn't like other entheogens. The amount of people that that come to me and say, I'd like to step into the five experience, and I'm asking them some questions about it, like, well, I've done tons of psilocybin, or I've done LSD, right? It's like it's not the same. They're uh, sorry, we had a little technical hiccup, but the point I was trying to articulate is again, having a support system in place. And similar to your experiences, I was going through mine and I came back to the Midwest here, especially in Iowa. There was really nobody that had had the experience, and there was nobody to talk to. There was nobody that understood what the experience was like.
Mhm.
And Martin's book was very valuable to me too, right? It's like I
Yes.
was trying to figure out what happened during this experience, which sounds unique to people that have not had it. But again, it's not a deeply visual experience like a traditional entheogen, right? It's there's some visual components to it, but to me, it's more of an embodied experience. And it's like, what do you do with that? Well, first off, you have to even understand what's happening. Like, what happened? What is like potentially non-duality? What does this mean? And then how do you integrate that? So it's not your traditional integration either, which is I think why Martin's so good and powerful at what he does. Um, so if you're going to sit with somebody, I would ask them that. Do you have integration? What's that look like? Are you trained in integration? Are you just going to tell me to go breathe and journal, right? Those are helpful. That's not the depth of integration though. There's levels to this. Um, so find out, and if not, you need to create a structure in place. Um, I'm curious about so that 2 months, how discombobulated were you over those 2 months? Like, how often were you thinking about the experience? How much was it impacting your life?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I was going into themes that I normally just don't dive into on the day-to-day basis. Um, I had been, working on my business and things like that. And but in my spare time, I was looking up uh, details such as like, human trafficking documentaries. Um, Things like that, like where I'm like, okay, these things are kind of really going on and uh just anything that was dealing like with dark matters. I took more of an approach to look at them without any, oh, I don't want to deal with this right now. It was like I was kind of opening up more to what was actually going on. Um, and yeah, it because I was just so opened up and raw, it just felt like this stings, but we got to figure some things out here. Like if this is going on, if this is how things operate, then we have to be an account that something that we may be doing could be connected to this in some way, shape, or form. Since we all are connected, right? And so I was just feeling that more. And I was on social media a lot. I was crying a lot. There was a lot of stuff that I just felt like, okay, hey, I could take a step back away from the internet. Nobody told me, hey, take the phone away, or anything like that. But I was doing a lot. I was a bit more emotional. I was a bit more public with some things than I would like to be. And overall, a lot of my relationships were breaking down. I was a part of a group where I was serving in some capacity, had to be pulled away from that. uh, Best friend relationship that I had finally broke down. I felt like I couldn't work my job anymore as a teacher. I couldn't stay in my place anymore. I was even seeing Chicago as a place of like, oh, this place is just really dark. Like it was like everything was dark for a minute. And so I said, okay, I have to figure out how I can exist in this region if I'm going to be here, and figure out how I can exist in this world if these things are actually going on in the way that I experience them. So those 2 months, again, it was day by day things unfolding. I also felt like I could hear, oh, so odd, because it wasn't schizophrenia. I was just able to really feel that wise conscious, call God, say, hey, do this. And I'm like, no, I don't think it's a good idea. No, I don't think it's a great idea. And then, and it's not a voice that would say, well, if you don't do this, it just was like, well, if you don't do this, you understand that this could be a possibility. Just backs up and I do it. I don't like it, but it's something that my ego needs to go through at that time. I didn't like it, but it's something that I had to go and experience through that time so that I could grow. And so that wasn't something also I could say to my therapist or something that I could say to someone else because they're like, schizophrenia, I don't know about that. Let's write that down. And so, but it made me realize like, okay, yes, this conscious is online, is guiding, and it means serious business, but not in a way where it is biased or bullying you, or if you don't do this, you're going to hell or heaven or whatever. It wasn't that kind of thing. This was just the wisest part of myself giving me things that I needed to do in my integration process, you know.
No, that's a great breakdown. It's interesting though that like you'd have a kind of flip side of the coin, darker experience, and then go down the rabbit hole of like sex trafficking, right? Like you would think the average response would be to avoid anything. Um, but I think, there's some super important pieces here. And again, I'm not gonna I'll share an experience, but I'm not trying to push my belief onto anybody. It's just how I interpreted the experience and how it made me feel okay. And you
Yeah.
use the word kind of neutral, that voice, that more conscious aspect, source creation, whatever you want to call it, when it came into me was always very neutral, right? And I'm like, how could it be so neutral? It was just like, meh. Um, and I remember having like pseudo near death experience, and I'm like, I feel like I'm in front of source or connecting with source, and I'm like, should I be here? Should I be back on Earth? And it's like, eh, right? And I'm like, why is that? And I had this interesting thought. Again, it's just a belief, so don't anybody take this as like it's factual. But like, if there is more past this, right? Like, if this is just a small taste of it, and there's more past this, or like, here's a simpler way of putting it. um if you knew that when you died that there was something more and something beyond that, right? And like there was some sort of level of continuation, would you kind of care about the things that happen here on some level? Like, oh, that was a bad experience, but that's just like a teeny blip in eternity, right? So I would be able to see suffering in that way of like, that's unfortunate, but this is short-lived. And then there's more past that. And maybe that's for my, background in Christianity and not trying to equate it to heaven, but almost similar to that. But that helped me be able to start looking at things more negative that were darker. And again, I'm not trying to put that belief on anybody, but that's what helped me is this. I did feel like the God I was experiencing or the experience of my consciousness was more neutral and also was getting kind of similar. Just one very specific one. It's like I remember had a ceremony and I came home and anytime I started talking and there was like any type of egoic piece, there was like this little voice in my head that went ego. I'm like, oh, that was disruptive. And then I could see I'm like, oh, you're saying that so they think you're important, or you're like it really like started like hyper analyzing all the things coming out of my mouth and all ego. And I'm like, oh yeah, it is that. But it was very new. It's like, yeah, that's fine. You can say it, you can do it, but that's your ego. Anyhow.
Mm,
Um, so yes,
yes.
it felt kind of schizophrenic. I'm like, I don't know if I can tell
Yeah.
anybody this. Um,
Yes.
but it's not. I mean, right? There's three to me. There's three parts of your brain. There's the witness behind it all, which is the consciousness. There's that part of you that's like on a higher self, and there's the automatic part. And most of the thoughts that we're having on a day-to-day basis are just repetitious thoughts that we had yesterday, kind of based on your programming, based on your life experiences. But there's a witness behind all that. And when the witness kind of chimes in, it's different. And you know it's different for some reason. Um,
Oh yeah.
I'm curious because I've got nothing but love for Martin, and he's got a great integration class. So, Martin, if you're listening to this, I'm pumping your class for you. It's a great integration class specifically for 5-MeO. Like my wife and I teach an integration course. It's more for general entheogens, but I do believe that integrating five is a different experience and it requires a different skill set. It's like saying I'm a surgeon. Well, I'm a brain surgeon. Well, I'm an open heart surgeon. Yeah, we're both surgeons, but we have very specific skill sets. What do you think specifically? Is there anything that kind of that you could recall of like, oh, that piece of advice or that perspective or that share really shifted how I was able to kind of integrate this experience?
Mm, wow. Okay. Our session was like an hour long. Um, and so it was so much ground to cover in that 1 hour. Uh, I would say that Martin's, would say things from his book but there were some other things that he mentioned to me uh about the experience. And I can't really say like word for word what it was, but it was more so of that, like, okay, you experience God, you're a part of this, and it's clearly guiding you, and you're not gonna steer away from that. So, you have to trust in that and allow your journey to unfold, as it should. And, remember that it's you, the one that's in control of this thing, and that, he was like, you were in the muck. Yeah. But, you have to remember that you're in control of it. And from there, I did blossom into the best version that I could be at that particular time. I really did. My business had took off in ways that I couldn't have imagined. I moved to a whole nother country. I had adopted another cat at the time. I took one cat with me, I adopted another cat, and me and that other medicine woman, we began to host retreats, but I was always in the shadowing kind of position because I realized like, wow, okay, there could be profound change that comes from this medicine. I got to see two sides of how it works, right? But I also get to create a container where I actually get to support people for much longer than I had been supported. It was like, okay, I did the sacrament, and now I'm in traffic 20 minutes later. What the hell is this? Like So I created a container where I at least want to monitor people for at least a month. Take you away from your environment. Let me monitor you for a month and have somebody cook for you for a few weeks. And we just need to focus on our process. And so it gave me the ability to be able to create something. And, we go through our experiences for a reason. I went through mine. It was a dark period for 2 months, but I was able to figure out how to create something from that where people get the support that they need with this. So nothing was lost in that. So yeah.
Well, I love that, and again, we're in agreement on so many things, I think, and I know it's tricky in this kind of society, and we kind of touched on that prior, like cost of living. People are working so much, like to be able to take a week even seems like a long time for people, right? But this medicine, to me, just my perspective, yes, it could be a very powerful upfront experience, but it's like the shifts are very subtle and they're over like a longer period of time. It's right. Like the analogy I've used is like if you got a new set of lenses, so you went out and got a new pair of glasses and you're seeing the world just even slightly different, just slightly different. Well, now you have to go experience all of reality all over again with this new perspective. It's like that whole Buddhist concept of like child's mind. It's like, oh, I'm viewing things differently. That takes time. You can't view all of reality in a weekend. You definitely can't do it like 15 minutes after ceremony, then hopping on the subway, which I had some participants very similar experience like in New York. Like I'm gonna take the subway, then the bus home. I'm like, I would get anxiety when they would say that. Um, or go back to my phone or go back to the news or go back to just because the objective is this gives you an opportunity to kind of reset and kind of shift again the way that you see reality. So then you need to do something with that. You need to shift your reality. And that means doing things differently while you have that neuroplasticity, and I think offering, at least a week to 2 weeks to a month, like approach it holistically. What are we doing on a day-to-day basis? Well, let's maybe do some breathing, some walking in the woods, some eating some healthy, nutritious foods, right? Like you can
Mm,
change the entire environment, and through changing, they always say to change your personality, you have to change your personal reality, right? Change your personal reality, and that's going to create this shift. And unfortunately, a lot of people just don't get that opportunity, but I agree with you. I think it's crucial. I think it's crucial. Um,
mhm.
in general, if you looked back, knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently?
I would have done a lot more research on this, on 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 this medicine in particular, because I already had like a inkling that I would take, some kind of substance that would really change my life. And for the longest, I thought it was ayahuasca. But it was just such this shift, and it was like, oh no, it's this. But I didn't do as much research. The first 2 weeks was like, oh, okay, my ego is fighting this. I'm seeing there's a lot going on here, of me going back and forth if I should actually carry on with this. And I did, and I didn't regret it, but I would have liked to know a bit more research about this particular medicine. Um, there's not a lot of people that I also talk to that have experienced the other side of the coin. So I'm not sure if I would have gotten much information on that part. That was just something for me to experience. But looking back overall, the integration piece was going to be helpful regardless if I was going to get, okay, the bliss and love side or just the real dark, grim side, right? Um, Either way, the foundation for integration, that's the part that I wanted to, or I would have researched more on, set up more of a foundation for first, and then go into the experience just open for whatever it has to give me, right? The integration part is the foundation for all of this. It's very, very important. And I appreciated Martin at that time seriously because there was no one in my community that was going to be able to assist me to the degree that he assisted me. Even in that 1 hour in his book, there was absolutely no one that was going to be able to assist me in that way, at least that I could find, right? He was the one that I heard about the medicine first from in the podcast years prior. And so he was the person that I reached out to about this.
Yeah, I think a piece that is often missing in the facilitation is really good informed consent. I don't know if the informed consent could actually change the outcome, but I think it's important for participants to know the potential outcomes, right? I think too often people are, I don't want to say sold because I don't think that's the intention, but led to believe, or they just hear again, if they do some research, most of it you're right is like, oh, I was one with God. It was like unconditional love. I felt I was one with everything. It was very blissful and positive. And those are great experiences, and that's what obviously what we hope for. But there's another side of that, and you've seen it, and I've seen it. It's like that doesn't always happen, and I think people need to know that so they can be prepared for that, right? It doesn't catch them off guard, and then there can be a heavy level of integration. There can be a heavy level of support. So I'm not seeing as much informed consent in the space as I'd like to see. And again, that's kind of that upfront preparation and intake process. I mean, I've gotten some comments from people like, "Are you trying to scare people away?" And it's like, no, but I'd rather them say no to all the information than yes to limited information because that's not informed consent.
Yes.
You have to have all the information to actually consent to the experience. Um, and yeah, Martin was instrumental to me too. Again, I mean this with hubris. I figured a ton out on my own because I had to, right? Just probably did more medicine than needed to be. Hindsight being 2020. If I had a good coach or an integration, I probably could have done less. But it just kept working with it and trying to figure out what's going on here. And he was the first one that when I finally landed on some of my conclusions, that him and I connected, and I'm like, oh, you're okay. You kind of worked in the right direction. There's some shifts here, but we're on a very similar page, and that felt good. I'm like, because I had a lot of respect for him and his book Entheogenic Explorer. I think probably one of the best books I've written or read on the topic.
Hmm.
So again, another shout out to you, Martin. Um,
Yes. Yes.
what would you want others to know in closing? Two last questions. What would you want others to know before working with this medicine? Like if you had advice to somebody that's like, yeah, I've heard about it. I've been invited to a couple ceremonies. I haven't done it yet, but I'm considering it. What advice would you give them?
Mm. It is, it's amazing. It is amazing. And it serves the purpose that it's supposed to serve for you at the time. And I believe personally that this medicine is the medicine that we've all needed to connect the bridge. It doesn't mean that everybody is supposed to take it, but I believe for those that are active in doing something about being the best version of themselves so that we can be better souls for our experience, life in general, this is what connects us. This is what we would realize like, wow, it helps us, it helps us put on the lens for us to see that we all are one, right? And with that comes one side and another side. And there's a personal responsibility that one has now once you see these goggles that you can't take off anymore. Or once you walk through a door and you turn back around and the door disappears, right? It's a personal level of responsibility. It's a personal choice to mature in that moment. And so with seeing things for how they are and what they are and embodiment, you then can change your life in many ways, but you have to be ready for that change. Because like when Martin, taught in the class, it's like a bomb goes off in your life. And people have to be ready for that bomb. It's like the phrase that one of my mentors told me is like, psychedelics is like setting your house on fire, but at least it gives you a tent and you get to sit outside and look at the house being on fire. You can realize why it's on fire, and then you can realize how you can put it back together. You know what I mean? But people have to be ready for that. They have to be ready for that. They have to be sick and tired of what's going on in their lives, and they have to actually want the change and be ready to surrender, to that, right? And if not, it may not be for you because it may not come in the way that you want. It's not a control thing here. You don't really want to control this experience, right? So that's something that people should know. Is that for me personally, it changed my entire life. I am an advocate for it. I speak about it at the communities. I've been asked to speak about it at conferences. It has changed my entire life. And I have more trust in self, my community, the universe as a whole, God as a whole because of it. And so yeah, that's something that people should know for me.
No, I think that it's so interesting that you said that. My wife and I were talking. I've got a men's group out here, and we were walking last Friday actually, and the topic came up as it does. And one of the gentlemen was like, "I've been wanting to do that. I've been wanting to do that." Because some of the guys in the group haven't done the medicine, which is great. I don't encourage it. I don't push it. They know I'm here, right? So if you're interested, we can have the conversation. He's like, "I've been interested in it." He goes, "I'm just scared. Like everything with my wife is going really good right now, and my work's going good right now." And my wife and I were talking about it later. I'm like, that's not somebody maybe that should do the medicine. Like I think maybe the people that are best suited at specific times are the ones that are like I was so desperate, right? Where I'm like, if I died out here in the grass doing this medicine, I'd rather that than go home being the person I am, right? Like a level of desperation for change and shift and evolution. I'm like, I need this. This isn't working anymore.
Mm,
So
yeah.
like to have that eviscerated was okay, right? Not easy, but okay. I'm like, okay, we got to rebuild that house that's on fire. Let's rebuild that into something new. But if you got a house you love, um, maybe this isn't the medicine for you at that moment. And it kind of reminds me of the scene in the Matrix where the guy's like eating the steak in front of Mr. Smith and he goes, I know it's not real, but it tastes delicious, right? It's like it's I think some people that have taken the medicine see reality as kind of like this pseudo mate. Like we see reality in a more, I don't want to say more real way, but in a different perspective versus maybe people that aren't taking medicines or haven't had these type of experiences who are eating the steak and think that's okay. Eat the steak, feel it's real. I don't have any issue with that. You don't have to, everybody doesn't have to come to this side of the table. So I'm in agreement. I think maybe some of the folks that are best suited for it are the ones that are maybe desperate's not the ideal word, but willing to have their entire perspective on reality shifted, and have room for that, right? Have room for that because if you've got a reality that you're really comfortable with and it starts shifting, it's going to create disruptions. You're going to feel uncomfortable with that and may not want it. And I see in a lot of people where that the ego will pull them right back to where they were. I've got a couple people that I've served 4 or 5 times. I don't know if they've ever shifted, right? Because they're like, I kind of liked where I was. That's okay. Beautiful. Just keep doing that. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
Last question. And this is where you can share anything about yourself. It's just like anything you'd like to share that we didn't cover, something that you may feel is important to the community. I think you're an important piece in a multitude of ways, but you touched on something earlier, and I'll give you, you don't have to talk on this, but I'd also be curious about it. Like the inner city community, right? How do we impact that? Right. Like we've had this conversation. Most of the teachers or future teachers sign up for my class are very similar, right? We're not getting as many, folks with different ethnicities and backgrounds into the space. And I'm just curious, why do you think I'm sure we know why that is, but why do you think that is, and what can we do about it? And is there a message to those communities? And then anything else you'd like to share?
Yeah. Um, well, I'll talk about this. For a long time, uh, I didn't know this, but the Midwest was more so of where we were doing entheogens underground for the longest in inner city communities. And especially in particular, Black and Brown communities where it was just underground and it was taken very serious and, in safe containers, etc. But in Chicago, it was just not something available to me. I felt like an eyeball growing up here. And in my 20s, teaching in the public schools and really getting involved in actually using things like psilocybin to teach my kindergarten class, helped me be more colorful, more attentive, in my curriculum, being more creative with how we can get these children to function better, right? And actually be prepared for first and second grade and be on track. So it was kind of isolating. And so I realized that, okay, I need to connect deeper with other people in my region, but I am going to have to leave Chicago to go there. So, um, places like Detroit that have actually decriminalized all entheogens, including 5, right? They were on the front first of actually like, you know, uh, learning about it, studying it, and then doing it. And so I would say to people, you may have to go to like a sister city of yours. Detroit is a sister city of Chicago. You may have to go to a sister city where people are actually already doing it, where it may be underground, and they are actively working in their communities to decriminalize or even legalize it, you know. And so that's what I did personally. The reason as to why I feel like a lot of us are not doing it at the levels that we should be doing it is because of the status of it, the legal status of it, and there's a more risk, with those from different ethnicities, usually get harsher penalties, and so there is this kind of fear. There's also this fear of not really wanting to endure more trauma because there is a risk with some. Uh, Entheogens and people, also when they go through a bad experience, you never hear the end of the bad experience that they go through. And then that scares the crap out of anybody else. But we don't often hear about the wonderful stories that happen with entheogens or the profound change, or that if you had a bad trip, was that trip really bad? If you grew from that and you became one of the best versions of yourself from that. Was that considered to be a bad trip? For you, it may have felt like infinity, but it was really only 30 to 45 minutes. And then you compare that to 2, 3, 4, 5 years of yourself excelling. I'll take that versus, just, you know what I'm saying? Like I would take that. So
100%.
I um I feel as though how we get more people into the space is sharing our raw authenticity of what we've gone through with this medicine or any other entheogens, and again connecting and building the bridges in other spaces. In Detroit, there's an entheogenic conference where you do see more of the Black and Brown communities attending. You will see, others attend too, but it's more so ran by them, right? So you get to hear their data, their research. Oakland as well has a entheogenic conference called the Oakland Psychedelic Conference, right? Where it's mainly ran by, people of color, BIPOC communities. And so for us to start building that gap and bridge, is there has to be some support, a willingness for also other other ethnicities that are, white or European or whatever, to come forth and say, hey, I would like to talk at this conference and I would love to talk to your members and apply, because we need to build that bridge for everybody, so that we can bring in more people of interest into the entheogenic spaces.
Yeah, that was perfect. I agree. Um, yeah, it's such an interesting thing. And I think just a kind of a fun point is like I would go through hell, like literal hell for the day to get to where I am now. Right? Like so those tough experiences, like in the moment, and yours is a great example, a couple months of probably super uncomfortable, difficult life experience, right? To come out on the other side. So it's always tricky when I say, would you do things differently? I'm like, not many things in my life would I do differently because I'm so happy
Mhm.
with where I'm at now that all of those experiences are kind of like ingredients in the recipe of where I am now. So if I remove them, I
Yes.
probably wouldn't be this, right? It's like, nah, we needed the Tabasco sauce, man. It's not, doesn't have the same spice, right? So I'm grateful for all the hard experiences. In the moment, it doesn't feel comfortable and it doesn't feel like something that we want, but That's why your story's so great. It's like we can come out on the other side of these things when done right and getting some good guidance and having a good community and having good support. So I appreciate that. All right, this is it. Anything you want to share in general? Anything you want to say? Anything you want to share just in general in closing?
I would give I guess my Instagram is at Paige Flowers, PaigefLWRS. And if anyone wants to reach out for any reason, I'm here. People reach out to me all the time about entheogens and other stuff. So definitely send me a message.
Well, you've got a great page. I enjoy it.
Thanks.
And yeah, if there's ever any city conferences that you need somebody that looks like me to speak at, don't hesitate. Um,
Absolutely.
like I like that, and I think that's important. And we've had the conversation like, how do I expand this to other people, right? And again, diversity can come in lots of different packages. We've been pretty blessed. Like this current cohort, we've got 3 students from the Ukraine. Yeah, they may be
Wow.
white complexion, but the diversity is still there from a cultural standpoint, a geographical standpoint.
Absolutely.
So, like, how do we bring in all these different folks? And those are some great stories. I'm excited to get them on the podcast. They're literally working with people coming out of the war or
Yeah.
literally in combat. Like one of the gentlemen is like
Mm.
driving to the front line, dodging drones and gunfire to like facilitate these experiences on the front line. So those would be some
Wow.
interesting stories. Yeah, that's a whole
Wow.
nother conversation of like, wow, it's fascinating. But yes, more
Oh,
diversity in the space I
wow.
think is important, and it's like getting the message out to the people that will benefit from it. Um,
Mm.
well, you've been incredible per usual. Love having you. Love seeing you again. Yeah, and I just
Yes,
appreciate you taking the time.
absolutely. Thank you so much, Kirby. You're my brother. I appreciate you. Thank you.